Get ready to take your decoupage skills to the next level with these 5 game-changing techniques and mediums you can't afford to miss out on. Today is the 5 under $5 challenge, hosted by Emily at Farm Charm Chic and Buffy at Buffy Designs. So first we're going to be using a paper napkin. This is from Dollar General, and it was $1, and although it's really pretty, I'm going to paint over the front of that plant. I'm just using white chalk paint, and I'm going to give it 2 coats or however many it takes to cover up the writing and the plant colors. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to give the white part a coat of Mod Podge, and I'm going to let that dry completely. For this next part, I'm using some napkins that I found at a gift shop, but you could use any napkins you find from Dollar Tree or Dollar General or anywhere else. These are 2-ply napkins, so I did pull 1 ply away, and I'm just using that top ply with the design on it. And I'm going to cut out one of these quadrants. Now I'm going to place the napkin over the wood piece, and I'm adding another napkin on top because I am going to use my little mini iron to iron on top so that it will reactivate the Mod Podge and the napkin will stick. And I'm going to be very careful to get all around the edges so that it won't peel up. I'm going to let that sit for a minute and cool off, and then I'm going to go back with my little finger sander, or you can use an emery board or sandpaper or anything like that, and I'm just going to sand away the excess. Once that's done, I'm going to seal over the top with some more Mod Podge. To finish it off, I just added a little lace bow and I hung it on a ladder that I have in my home. I think this would also be a really cute embellishment to a wreath. Project number 2 is using some decoupage paper from Sonnet's Garden Blooms Maker's Box. So I got this frame at the Goodwill bins or a thrift store or something, but I only paid, I think, 95 cents for it. So I removed the backing, I cleaned it up a little bit, and I'm going to be painting that inner square, that inner part of the frame, with Fusion's Prairie Sunset, also from Sonnet's Maker's Box. I'll have her channel listed in the description box below if you're interested in that. In Sonnet's Maker's Box, she has 2 pieces of Roycycle decoupage paper and 2 pieces of the Painted Photographer decoupage paper. Now I'm using this one by Roycycle, and I'm just cutting it to fit the frame. Now I'm just running my fingers along the edge of the middle of that frame so that I can cut this portion of the paper out. I also snipped the corners at an angle so that it would fit around this little frame a little bit better. And as I placed it on there, I decided I needed to extend that yellow paint over the sides a little bit, just in case I did not get it on there perfectly. This way the yellow will blend in with the paper better than that white paint would. Usually when I use decoupage paper, I will mist it a little bit with some water because it tends to stretch a little bit. In hindsight, I would not have done this on this frame because each of those little picket fences, of course, are separate, and it did make it a little bit more difficult for me to place. So I would not do that if I were to redo this project. Once I have it placed like I want it, I just peeled back one side and I started applying the Mod Podge. I did do this in sections so that I didn't get overwhelmed if I needed to pull something up and replace it or straighten it up. Once I have it placed like I want it and have as many wrinkles out as I could get, I let it dry overnight. The next day I came back with my craft knife and I cut away those edges around the frame first. Then I took my little fingernail file and I filed around the edges, around the picket point parts and the sides. Now I was trying to decide exactly what would be the best way to remove the rest of the paper. So I tried going through the back. That didn't work very well, so I went through the front and cut along the edge, which worked okay for the most part, but there was a few places where it tore, but I didn't feel like I could get my fingernail file or my emery board down in there to use it. So I was just very careful and removed as much as I could and then used my fingernail file where I could. And now you can see I did not paint the back portion of this little picket fence, but I kind of like it with the white. It kind of gives it a contrast, but you could certainly paint it that yellow color as well as if you wanted to. Now I'm going to go over the decoupage paper with more Mod Podge just to seal it in. And just to finish this little piece off, I used part of the Painted Photographer's decoupage paper that was in the maker's box, and I put that in the frame. Everything matches and blends perfectly. Decoupage paper itself is usually around $3, so this is certainly not an expensive DIY. I got a set of these little drawers at the Goodwill bins. I don't know what exactly they went to, probably a jewelry box or something, but this one did not have a handle, so I just added a wood bead, and I'm using some antique wax to make it blend in with the original color of the box. I'm painting the sides of this little drawer white because at first I thought I would use tissue paper for this, and then I decided not to, so this certainly would not be necessary. What I did do was I used some Sweet Pickins milk paint in a pickle for the front part of the drawer. So I mixed 1 part water to 1 part milk paint, and I mixed that together and I let it sit for about 20 minutes before I used it. This paint was also in Sonnet's Maker's Box. So now after the paint has sat for about 20 minutes, I'm going to paint the front part of it with this in a pickle paint, and I'm going to let it dry. I'm also going to use my heat gun because you will get some cracking with milk paint if you heat it up. Once the paint had dried, I did apply a second coat, and this is when I used that heat gun, and I did get some really good crackles in this paint. Once I had dried the paint, I went back with my little finger sander and I sanded away at those edges. And this is where you'll see some of that chippiness and crackling. Now for those sides, I'm going to decoupage on some scrapbook paper. This is actually paper that I ordered from Temu, and I'm going to kind of measure those sides, then I'm going to use some Mod Podge. Now I'm applying that Mod Podge to one side of the box at a time, and then I will lay down that scrapbook paper. I cut away the excess paper, and then I used my finger sander to finish off the edges with a nice clean, smooth line. I repeated the process on the other side. For project number 4, I'm decoupaging with fabric. This is a little makeup bag that I got from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using this fabric that I got at Walmart. I think it was a fat quarter or something like that. So I'm going to cut it to size to fit on the top part of this little makeup bag. I'm going to be using Mod Podge made for fabric for this project. Once I have it cut to size, I'm going to apply the Mod Podge to the back of the fabric and then place it on the top of the bag. I let this dry overnight, and then I applied another coat on the top of the fabric and let it dry as well. The Mod Podge does say to let it sit for 72 hours before washing. For this project, I'll be using this sign from Dollar General that I got on clearance for maybe 10 cents. I'm also using some Fusion Coal Black paint. I'm just going to be painting over that little hello part on the center part of the tag, and I am going to extend that also around the edge. I did apply about 3 coats of paint. Now I'm using Mod Podge, and I'm going to be applying that all around the little sign in the middle. I took an old piece of sheet music and I am going to apply that to the front of the tag. Now you see here where I actually attempted to cut out that section of the tag that we painted black, but the paper is so fragile it just kind of tore, but I kind of like the way that looks. So once the Mod Podge was dry, I put that sheet music on, and I'm using my mini iron to heat up that Mod Podge and iron over that paper, and the paper will actually adhere to that Mod Podge. And once it had cooled down, I made sure that the edges were secure, and then I used my little finger sander and I sanded off the excess paper around the edges. Back from my scrapbooking days, I had this little piano cut out, but I didn't want it to be white. So I'm using a black permanent ink pad, and I'm just going to be dabbing that onto the piano until I get it like I want it. Once I have it to my liking, I'm going to place it onto the sign, and again I'm going to be using some Mod Podge to adhere it. I did place it down wet, and then I used a piece of parchment paper and I ironed over the top. Using some of my rubber stamps, these are actually from IOD. I used the word music in French, and I stamped that with white ink onto the little wood part at the top. The last thing I did for this little tag was I removed the white beads and I simply replaced them with some black beads. I hope you've enjoyed these 5 decoupage mediums and techniques under $5. If you liked this video, be sure and give it a thumbs up, and here's another video I think you might like as well. Thanks again to Emily and to Buffy for hosting today's challenge. Be sure and check out their channels in the description box below along with the playlist. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to share the chic. Bye now.